Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us in this panel. We have two great speakers today. First, we'll have Professor Adina Friedman, who's a regional expertise in the Middle East and North Africa. She has lived, studied, and worked in the region and has conducted research and published in and about the region. Her professional expertise is in conflict analysis and resolution, refugees, gender, youth, education, sustainable development, and peace building. She has extensive international experience and has conducted work in Morocco, Jordan, Israel, the West Bank, Gaza, Egypt, Turkey, Serbia, Kosovo, Bosnia, Northern Ireland, Estonia, and Moldova. Next, we will have Farid Mahameed, who is from the city of Al-Fam in the north of Israel, near Haifa. He studied at the ILLI Institute, and he's a biomedical engineering graduate from the Technion. Additionally, Farid holds a teaching certificate from Ben-Gurion University, specializing in mathematics. Farid is working towards being a teacher, and in 2011, he founded a school with a team of people in an unrecognized Bedouin community in the Negev. He also coordinated a Green Conscience program in which he educated students at school and at home in Bedouin villages on living an environmentally friendly way of life. Without making you wait any longer, I will now pass the floor to Professor Friedman.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody, or good night, or whatever it is. Let me just show. Okay, the way we'll go a little bit back and forth today, Farid and I, and in the end, we'll tell you a little bit about some theory, some practice, examples of our work, and some ideas that we're working on now, some projects that we're working on now along these lines that we'll be talking about. So first of all, we want to try to answer today, what is sustainable peace? What's sustainable development? And how are the two connected? And then how is all this related to the MENA region, to the Middle East and North Africa, and specifically to the Israeli-Palestinian peace? So it could be negotiations, but we're going to really be talking about much broader than peace negotiations. So first of all, again, I don't know what the level of your knowledge is, but negative, so some of this might be obvious to some, but we'll repeat it a little bit. So negative environmental phenomena sometimes are a direct cause of conflict, but in the very least, they can aggravate a conflict situation. And at the same time, working jointly to overcome these crises or these obstacles is a great opportunity to build relationships, peaceful relationships through this work. Also, sustainable development, we'll see soon how it and sustainable peace overlap and how it's integral to any kind of sustainable peace building or peace. So this is my very professional drawing here of two possible, not mutually exclusive and somewhat overlapping ways of looking at things, but one on the top left is looking at environmental issues or sustainable development issues, working on them as a way to achieve peace or to work on peaceful relationships between groups in conflict. And that could be within a society or between societies. And this is primarily environmental peace building, which we'll look at soon. On the other hand, on the bottom right here is another way of looking at it, which is sustainable peace being the bigger blue circle here, with environmental or in the environment and sustainable development or sustainability at its core. The two overlap greatly, and really, I could probably draw an opposite circle too. They're both at the center of the other, or they're both integral to the other. Okay, so just briefly, so we know the terms. Sustainable development is really an attempt to meet the needs of the current generation while not jeopardizing the needs of future generations. Sustainability is kind of the general paradigm where we're thinking of a situation where that is the case, where we're actually not living beyond the carrying capacity of our environment and where everything is, there's some kind of harmony and balance between society and nature and etc. And then environmental peace building is more it's a relatively newer field, although it's already widespread and growing by the minute. And it has to do with using that first picture here on the top left, using the environment or environmental issues to build bridges between and among people. Okay, so first to peace. What I'll do is I'll talk a little bit about some concepts, then Farid will talk about some more practical examples from his work, and then at the end, I'll add a few other regional examples and we'll mention our project. So peace we usually look at in a very narrow way. And for many people, it just means the absence of war. And what that actually also means is that peace talks often take place as an aftermath of war, as opposed to being a value in and of itself. Peace is like, oh, we had war, now we're after war, now let's pick up the pieces or let's fix things. And yeah, that's what some of us call negative peace. That would be here on the left. So no violence or no direct violence. It's a little more pragmatic and maybe a little more bleak. It's a band-aid, or it's something that's supposedly solving a problem, usually in the very short run. And the means of getting the peace, that could be any means, which there's a contradiction there, but that's another story. Okay, positive peace, on the other hand, is some kind of more structural, it's the lack of violence, not only direct violence, but also structural violence and cultural violence. It's something more proactive. It's peace by peaceful means, it's preventive. So the idea is that if these structures exist, if positive peace exists, it's less likely for other things, for war and other kinds of extreme conflict to occur. The reason I'm talking about positive peace, hang on, is because, so again, it has to do more with attitudes, institutions, structures, etc., that sustain a peaceful society, because we're talking about sustainable peace or sustained peace. So again, sustaining peace is some kind of attempt to broaden the peace agenda, include proactive measures, reinforce the positive things that already work, that exist and work, and work on structures, attitudes, institutions, etc., that make things work well and fix the ones that don't work so well. Okay. So again, it's not just other things that are involved in positive peace are issues of solidarity, transparency, compassion, etc. And this can, like I said, be internal within a country or within a society, however we define a society. Could be a statewide society or a narrower society. So Farid will talk a little bit about such examples. Or between countries, same thing. Factors that go along with this usually, or that are the outcomes of positive peace, would be thriving economies, better ecological situation and better performance, resilience, and like I said, more inclusivity or inclusiveness, well-being and happiness of the population. Importantly, sustaining peace is something that's not, we're often used to thinking of peace work as contingent upon funding cycles, donors, other kinds of mandates of, projects, etc. But that's not really how the world works. I mean, it's kind of how part of the world works, but it's not really how peace becomes sustainable. It should be really looked at as an ongoing kind of process. Peace should be looked at as a public good that the government is responsible for, but that people all have a stake in, so that everybody should invest in it and everybody should reap the benefits from it. It's multidimensional and multisectoral and inclusive. Inclusivity is important. We'll get to that. Sustainable development, on the other hand, it might sound a little similar in some ways. Like I said, it's development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And it involves human development in tangent with sustaining natural resources, etc., and ecosystems, biodiversity, natural resources of various kinds. And so again, it's not environment as opposed to people or people as opposed to environment. It's living in some kind of equilibrium. It has mainly these 4 dimensions, although the exact definitions sometimes change a little bit, but basically human, social, economic, and environmental. So sustainable development is more than just the environment. We don't have to go through that. In 2015, the UN adopted the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that they wanted countries who signed on to this to reach by 2030. And as you can see here, eliminating poverty and hunger, having good health and well-being of citizens, education, gender equality, water, energy, et cetera, et cetera. Let's see, reduce inequalities that exist. In case any of you haven't noticed, in the last couple of years of COVID, inequalities, disparities within and between countries have become also much more exacerbated and much more noticeable. So that's another way of looking at environment and looking at how only in extreme situations we really pay attention to the inequalities that exist around the world. Okay, true peace, again, this is no novelty. They can't really only come from above. They have to be, it's great when there are agreements that talk about peace between leaders, but it's not sustainable in and of itself. It requires bottom-up work of people to people. And also sustainable development, or the environment, doesn't know political boundaries. So just like with peace being something that you can't do on your own, sustainable development is something you can't do on your own. It's something that requires collaboration with other people and other groups of people. Okay. So again, my wonderful drawings here: positive peace, sustainable development. And here's one way of looking at them, highly overlapping. Or here's another way, same original picture. Sustainable peace, by definition, although it's not always clear to everyone, by definition has sustainable development or sustainability at its core. If it doesn't have that at its core, it's not sustainable peace. That's our premise. Throughout history of the conflict and peace talks, there have been a number of milestones. I'm not going to go over all of them, but just one example is the Bahrain Code that followed the Madrid process by a few years, the 91 Madrid process, in which the parties at those talks, the multilateral talks, agreed to recognize that the environment was important and agreed on all kinds of principles on how to manage the environment, how to work together towards it, and what issues, like here you have water, marine and coastal environment, air, waste management, and desertification. In general, in Israel, so both Farid and I are citizens of Israel, but we can talk a little bit also on the Palestinian side, more maybe Farid will add to that. But sustainability in Israel is very limited. It's going in the right direction, the discourse, but it's still not there. Way back 20 years ago, Israel prepared some report and following up on some international agreements. And it is established, among other things, this Coalition for Sustainability, which, among other things, criticized the government's lack of action or insufficient action up until that point. And that committee also talked more about, or that coalition talked more about, regional strategies and the need to connect politics and environment. And okay, I'll stop here to get some examples from Farid, and later we'll come back to this to look at some more examples from the region.
Okay, thank you, Adina. Shukran. Evening of roses, everybody. It's evening here. So let's start. Why environment? I work in the institute that's one of its motto: environment knows no borders. Today, I have a field tour with an American group from Oregon. And I told them my motto is pollution knows no boundaries. Environment and pollution and peace are intertwined, and they can't separate them. Imagine if you have two adjacent countries. One is rich and fluid environmental, the other is poor, it's environmental, there are pollutions, it's going to spread. And from this logic, we need to go from bottom to up, meaning you can't separate, just live in your own shell. Environment knows no borders. What's happening at your home, at your backyard, will eventually reach your neighbors. And building on that, we try to build on local initiative, on local cooperation, on local level, then trying to connect with different communities, and then we're trying to go global. So I will just show you a nice, like a Mentimeter. Once we ask international community, what do you think? I'm just gonna read it. List the challenges you think exist while working in the field of transboundary cooperation. This is my field. Political challenges, process challenges, cultural, personal challenges. And you could see the most, difficult challenge is patience, because it's really hard. It's working with people. It's not the formal agreement between government. And as Adina said, you can't have peace between government if you don't have grassroots movement, if you don't have a bottom-up approach between people. So I'm working on a different projects, which are not only environmental, also pedagogical, and also shared society projects, because they all are interconnected. You can't separate shared society on an intra or inter level in a country and environmental projects, because if you have, again, not two rich countries or two environmental, let's say we have towns, one which is affluent and the other is poor, and one has a very good sustainable environmental solutions, the other does not have. So eventually we're gonna have a spillage effect. So through my work, we try to work on different levels. One of the levels are environmental, epidemiological, the other is pedagogical, and the third is shared life, where we're trying to tear down which I call like barriers that actually are psychological and also cultural barriers that actually exist inside societies. So I'm gonna start with my first, just a sec, please. Yeah, here. So this is one of my projects. I'm working on transboundary education and transnational cooperation to fight climate change. So you could see here different examples of projects that I was involved in, which involve pedagogical, educational, and teaching approach to try to overcome challenges which are possessed to us by climate change. So I will start by saying we have an oil spillage half a year ago, and you could see that we have the map of the country where all the points where the oil spillage has reached the coast. And I was wondering, it did not reach the Gaza Strip? It did not reach Sinai or Lebanon? So why this picture is symbolic? Because it sometimes shows the problems in the Middle East, where everybody thinks that it's only his own problem, and it's not on a regional scale. So how do you actually try to solve and come to, as Adina said, sustainable peace? So for me, it all goes down to a very nice phrase by Paul Freund. Once was the Supreme Court said, should never, the climate of the era should never be influenced by the weather of the day, but inevitably we will be influenced by the climate of the era, which means until you reach to this point where you're gonna have this peace between countries, you need to change the weather on a daily basis in order to change the climate of that era. So for me, I'm working with the small person on the street. It's face-to-face, people-to-people connections. What's your concern? What's your daily problems? How we can solve it? And less focused on a bigger agenda, because I think so many things are being diluted when you're speaking about big projects or big peace between countries. Sometimes you have peace between countries, but not between people. I call it frozen peace. So we have great example nowadays, youth activism, where they actually, especially in the field of climate change, and also education, where actually youth are pushing transboundary global agenda like get Greta Thunberg and Malala Yousafzai. So our approach first start to cater to local needs. We go to local communities. This project was between Palestine, Israel, and Jordan. And we try to connect communities around the Dead Sea Basin. And we said, what's the most pressing matters, the local. So we categorized all of them. Then we try to build local solutions from local knowledge. And then we actually, after we do this brainstorming, we bring the group together and try to have a local solution where all the groups share their problems, share their initiatives and the solutions. And after we brainstorm, we come back to our own community, we try to implement the solutions, and then we see, like, we do a feedback and try to figure out what went right and what went wrong in order to have what's called like some kind of global initiative where every region in the planet could have the skeleton and add to it whatever it needs to cater to its special domestic needs. So for example, the pedagogy that I believe is what's called activism-based learning and choir-based learning. It's very important because it's how you try to teach the community to help itself, to be the change that the community wants to see in the world. So we're trying now to work with local community on what's called climate change pedagogy, where we actually are fostering and trying to grow domestic indigenous youth environmental leadership, where we teach them how to analyze a root cause analysis of the problems, defining it, gathering evidence, generating solutions which are locally, then try to draw up conclusion, and then try to communicate it in order to change what's happening in their own society. And what I like about this initiative, it actually connects what's happening on a local scale to a regional scale, and then on a global scale, where everybody in the planet could now see, okay, this was in Rahat, the largest Bedouin village in Israel. And if I'm interested, let's say, in a desert community, urbanized, modernized desert community, Bedouin community, I could go there and see their project and try to learn from it. So we try to have them to define the problem, gather the evidence, and again, remember, we're speaking about pupils. They're not even adults, but in order to reach this point where we have awareness to environment and the fact that it's transboundary, doesn't matter if you have peace between countries or not. Countries actually do cooperate over environmental matters because it's the conception of them that they are neutral. So we believe that everybody can do it. And I will give now another example of a project that we actually were done where we all were forced to work together. It's after the Corona era. For what I like about Corona, it gave us disruptive solutions to peace building and environmental peace building, because Corona forced everybody to work together for the vaccination, for the prevention. Nobody said, oh, Corona is only a Chinese or American or European problem. And I think it's in a sense, it was a good example of actually how the world could actually hold its breath together and try to give a local and global solutions. You know, when I speak with my friends about environmental solutions and how we need to stop the clock, before the Corona, a lot of the people were saying, oh, we can't do it. It's impossible that you actually ask for people to stop using fossilized fuel, plastic bags. But Corona actually taught us if we want, we can stop the clock. We can actually have drastic sudden changes. And I really believe that we need to learn from this experience. So one of the projects that we actually were involved in was about detecting WBA, wastewater-based epidemiology, detecting the SARS-CoV-2 virus, which caused COVID-19, its colloquial name, Corona, in transboundary river that crossed through Palestine to Israel, the Hebron River. It's a really very interesting case study because Hebron River stems from Hebron City, which is in Area A. Then it goes through, meandering through Palestinian villages, Area B. Then it goes through some Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank, Area C. Then it crosses into Israel. Then it crosses into the Gaza Strip. Then it goes to the Mediterranean. So imagine like just one river crossing three different geopolitical entities. And what's happening in Hebron today with the American group, they've seen, for example, that in Hebron, you have what's called the stone industry. You have a lot of slurry and sludge in the water. But because the political party don't communicate with each other, the Israeli attitude is, okay, like we don't need to cooperate, we're gonna solve the problem ourselves. We went to the wastewater treating plant in Israel, and one of its main problem is the slurry and the sludge in the water, which stems from Hebron. Well, I'm giving this example because you can't ignore environmental problems. You need to have like source-based solutions in order to try to communicate also, not also environmental, but also peace building. Because if you want to say, I want to have peace with two parties, and you ignore like the environmental, the social, the economical situation, then you can have a true peace. So in this, our approach, we try to show that we can actually help marginalized and fringe communities to better detect COVID-19 spreads without asking them to do the test. And we work with the Bedouin community in Israel, which mainly lives in recognized and unrecognized Bedouin villages. And also we work with the Palestinian communities in the Hebron government, in the West Bank, occupied West Bank. And our work focused on the people that lives in those communities. In Israel, it was really funny because our project wasn't funded by the Israeli Ministry of Health. It was funded by USAID. And it's hilarious because those communities actually were one of the hot spots of the spread of the virus. But because they were ignored by the government, and because they're also very, let's say, politically weak, nobody took them into consideration. And what we're here saying, if you want to have peace inside the country, you need to cater to those communities. You can't just ignore them and just hope that the solution will vanish. So we worked, I'm going to share my screen. We worked on detecting the COVID-19 in the Hebron River. And I'm going to skip some main issue. I will show you why we did it, because this, I think, exemplify the problems in what I called like governmental work. So this was from a website from the Israeli Ministry of Health, when was like in the outbreak of the corona in the Bedouin community. And you could see back then that in 4 major Bedouin towns, there were not even one detected coronavirus positive case, which is ridiculous. But why this is happening? Because there's no outreach to this community. There's no true dialogue that you're trying to build with them a process. And especially with corona, most of the people were asymptomatic. They were under testing, their lack of healthcare services, lack of governmental trust in the government, a social stigma, misinformation. So what we said, okay, let's try to work with the communities, with the local communities. And you could see here, we took grab sample, an automatic sample from the river, from different Bedouin communities, some of them recognized, some of them unrecognized. And my work, I was leading this project. My work was, you need to take each city, each town, like it's a country by its own. It has its own rules, its own, problems. And this helped me a lot because sometimes they look at certain, let's say, populace as monolith. Oh, the Bedouin, the Palestinian, the Jews, the Israelis, like they're all the same. And no, like you just sometimes you'll be surprised to know that even 2 adjacent small villages have let's say, a totally different worldview on many things. So we took samples from the river, from catchment facility, from wastewater treating plants, from a sewer in those communities, and we analyzed them. And we took these pictures from us taking the samples. And again, it all wasn't governmental work. And why I'm stressing that, because I don't wait for the government to make the change. If I want to see the change, I need to be this change in this world. And that's why, like, we did this hands-on projects. We went to the field and we tried to make the change by our own means. It's difficult because you need funding, but sometimes what I'm saying, it's not only about the money, it's also about your willingness to actually have a true dialogue. So we did RTQ-PCR analysis, And at the end of the day, we did show some significant results, which shows that there's discrepancies between what the Israeli Ministry of Health is actually showing about the phase of Corona in the Bedouin community and what's actually there on the ground. Why this is interesting? Because after our project, the Israeli Ministry of Health actually started a new project to detect COVID-19 in the sewer of the Bedouin communities. The phase 2 was trying to detect the COVID-19 in the Hebron River in the occupied West Bank. So you see an example here, because Hebron and the Palestinian communities are very decentralized, like Israel, and they lack infrastructure and sewer system. It wasn't easy to detect it. So we need to cooperate with the local communities. Each town has its own council, each city. And we try to build with them a process that they feel comfortable with. And one of the most surprising, you can see the map here. One of the most surprising topics that were raised is the fact that most of the people weren't worried about Corona, weren't worried about water pollution. They were worried about the smell, because this is like the Palestinian Tuscany. All of them like nice, very beautiful agricultural farms, villages, but the smell there is horrible. And why I'm stressing this, because when we went there, they said, we just want to know where the smell has come from. It's even more important for us to know if it has Corona or not. So we just show you here that at the end, we took samples and now we're done with this project and we do the analysis. And we're trying now to communicate it with the local community. And after this success of the project, we even want to go further, where we want to train the local community itself to do on-site off-grid testing. Because again, we can say, okay, why we need to train the local community? They have Ministry of Health, they have hospitals, but our solution is being based on the man on the street. I want you to be capable to build the capacity to be sustainable and independent. So if we train, let's say, a local Palestinian community of farmers and give them the tools to detect for water pollution, for the spread of diseases, they could be an early warning, site, and for not only for them, for the community, but for the whole region. If we build this group of people, this network, this lattice, just imagine like how effective and efficient it would be. We could have really interactive map just showing exactly with high resolution where's the spread of the pollution, where's the spread of the virus. So this is like now where we're heading. We try to really build the capacity with local communities, small local ones that are off-grid, that are decentralized. And one of the other projects that we're working on, we're trying to provide off-grid wastewater treating system to communities in the Bedouin unorganized villages and the Palestinian, to try to treat their own water without the need of the Palestinian government, of the Israeli occupation forces or whatever, because we want them to be able to treat their own problems. So, it's funny because everybody's waiting for peace, but as we see in peace talk is taking too long. So until we reach this point, this is like when I have this discussion with people. So what we need to do, we just need to let the pollution happen. We need just to say, oh, we can't do anything unless there's a formal agreement. And I'm personally against this approach. With this approach, make facts on the ground, work with the people, train them, build the capacity, help them to help themselves, and then you can really try to build a formal peace. Sometimes even you don't need this kind of peace agreement, because people already conduct and have this kind of cooperation. I don't say that formal agreements are not important, really important, but they are not the essence. You could have a formal agreement between two countries, but the peace is dead between the people. It's just like you can cross the border or not. But for me, this is not peace, because now when the challenging that we're facing with climate change, with all the environmental challenges, you can't separate. You can't just say, I want, security peace, or I want just like a political peace. No, you should have the solutions, which is like a holistic approach. So the third part that we're trying to now, like I'm working on, is to promote shared society. So in Israel, the societies are very segregated. You have the Jewish society and the Arab society. And the government actually does not, let's say, encourage integrating the two of them. It's actually encourages segregation. And this creates problems also inside the country itself, because at the end of the day, you have like two adjacent communities that actually don't know nothing about each other. They just work with each other and they just come back to their homes. And once in a while, you have a flare-up of tension that could lead to, you know, uprising, and it could lead to conflicts. So we're trying now to have a show in the Nakab Negev area, a shared cultural society where we're actually trying to tear down these walls and actually bring people together, regardless of their political worldview or point of view, and just let them sit together and try to make creative shared cultural projects. So I'm going to give you just some example. It is a novel approach now. It's called like a shared society. And here we're doing cultural events. We plan to do also environmental projects, but we're starting with the culture in actually bringing people together just to sit with each other and to seek shared cultural projects and try to relate to different projects. So one of the projects that now we're working on, it's called Iftar Maimuna. So what's Iftar? In Ramadan, Muslims, if they need to break the fast, they like at the sunset, they eat. So this time it's coincide with Pesach, the Jewish holiday of Passover. So Maimuna, Adina could explain more. It's a Jewish Moroccan tradition, where historically Moroccan Jews gave the Muslims the leavened part of their food before Pesach, before Passover, and the Muslim will give it back to them after the Passover is over. So as a token of gratitude, they will bake them cakes. So we try to celebrate those two traditions right now and try to invite people. And you'll be surprised that the resistance that I faced actually wasn't, let's say, amongst the Arab society, the Palestinian in Israel. It actually was among the Jewish society in Israel, because some of them said, okay, as a Moroccan Jews, I can't sit with Ashkenazi Jews. As a conservative Jews, we can't have this, ceremony with religious, Jewish congregation. So it was really interesting to see how people are actually canceling each other even before they could meet each other. But now, actually, while we're trying to work and reach out, we're seeing more interest. We're seeing people who say, oh, I never thought that we could do it. And it comes down to the point, who said so? Who said that peace should only be between leaders? Who said that, neighbors could not speak with each other across different borders? And here, I believe in this approach, just on the hands-on experience, go on the field and try to make the change, make facts on the ground. Because if you don't make them, nobody is going to do them. And the peace is going to be more in theory, even and less in practice. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Farid.
Thank you.
We'll take the questions afterwards, okay, Daniel?
Okay.
Because
yes, go ahead.
some of them, I was looking at them, I might answer a few of them, but in any case, we'll have it'll be better answered at the end. So
All right.
share screen again. Okay, so Farid shared with us some examples of work in the Israeli context and with Israel's immediate neighbors. And I will add a few additional examples to that, and then we'll segue into our future ideas or our present ideas for the future and answer questions. So in Israel, there are actually Israel, Palestine, and Jordan, but definitely Israel, there are a lot of different initiatives around sustainability. It's not like we're inventing the wheel today. And most of them are bottom up. We're lucky that in Israel these days, with this government, we have people very supportive of environmental issues and sustainability in the right offices. So the Office of the Environment and the Office of Regional Cooperation and Health, and etc. A number of, and transportation. So people who actually really care about the environment are in the places to make something move at the top level. But there are many, many other examples. I'll just mention one more from Israel. That's an EMIS, which is the Eastern Mediterranean International School. It's a school in the center of the country where their motto is making education a force for peace and sustainability in the MENA, or in the Middle East. And they have international schools from all over the world. Only about 20% are Israeli, 20% are Palestinian. The rest are from anywhere and everywhere. And they have a curriculum that on the one hand is the International Baccalaureate, which is a kind of standardized curriculum, but all their extra activities and possibilities, most of them are around peace building and sustainability. And one of the things, they already do a great job on that. One of the things I happen to be working on with a few of my students these days in the States, but working with them on a project, is just to see if there are any gaps in the integration of those fields. Although, like I said, I'm sure they are already doing a great job. Here's just one example of students from that high school. They come and live there for at least 2 years, juniors and seniors. Sometimes they come already in 10th grade. And they live it on the premises, but they also learn on a more global scale about leadership for peace and sustainable development. Some other examples from regional context. So one main partner that, again, this is not work that I've initiated, but it's work that I have been lucky enough to cooperate with in Morocco. So one example of an organization that actually encompasses sustainable development and other things we're talking about very well, I think, is the High Atlas Foundation, founded by this guy here on the bottom right, Dr. Yosef Ben Meir. The aim of this organization is to advance sustainable development in Morocco. It started off in the High Atlas region around Marrakesh, but basically now there are projects all over the country, and they've been teaching and working with some other regional partners. Here, one example. So this happens to be a Jewish American group, not an Israeli group, but visiting a co-op led by women and by women. So cooperatives are a model that exists a lot in Morocco, but most of them are owned and run by men, and there are a certain number by women. And what it does is it takes, in this case, it was, I think, medicinal plants and something around agriculture. They take what the village is, first one village, but then people from neighboring villages joined. They take what they already do in the village, they build on what already exists, and they just give another option for women, in this case, to work together. It started off with a few women, and eventually lots of women found it very attractive and wanted to join. Work on things that already have some kind of grounding in that particular village or region, and have the women work on it together and sell it. So they're out of the house, they're doing something together, they're making a little extra money on their own, they share the money among them. This is not with that village, but this is with anyway, this is another co-op with Argan. This is another kind. We said sustainable development is not just environment, it's also cultural, and in this case, interfaith. So Morocco also has a relatively, or the largest Jewish community in the Arab and Muslim world these days and in the far past. And this is an example. Here is the king's advisor, the Jewish highest ranking Jew in the country, Mr. Andre Azoulay, and some academics from Israel. He's giving us a private tour and a sneak preview into an institution they built, which is Bet Zakera, which is the point of which is to commemorate not just the lives of Jews from that town, Essaouira, but also the cooperation, the positive precedents of cooperation between Jews and Muslims and others, and maybe Christians and internationals in the past, so that it's an example for the future. And this organization I just read the other day also has new new ties with Ben Gurion University and other initiatives with Israel. Here again, it's they renovate old synagogues or synagogues that were partially destroyed. There's another cultural place here. This is not Bet Daka, but it's another institution that Andre Azoulay is behind, he and other people, and it has festivals, cultural festivals, etc., and other activities where Jews, Muslims, Christians, and whoever participate. And for quite a few years, Israelis have been coming and participating in these different Andalusian music, etc. So that's another side of development. You're reinforcing existing cultural, cultural repertoires and relationship between different groups. Here's another example of working with local industries. So here are some women in another co-op that the Hayat Atlas Foundation works with and really helps elevate women who are already doing things to the next level. So it's not like they're coming and saying, hey, let us teach you something new. It's let's see what you already can do. Let's help you and train you further, but really it's empowering to the women. And when it's empowering to the women, it also helps with the children, because when women are busy working, their children need a place to be. So there's a school nearby usually, and then other women from neighboring villages come there. And then you have to work with the men of the village too, because even if they're supportive, if you have shifts in gender relations, everybody needs to be involved so that it's sustainable. So a lot of good things come from it. Here's just an example of the first carpet, I think, that they made in this co-op. So this is my daughter on the right a few years ago. We bought the first carpet, and then they divide the money among them. So it's also this great feeling of accomplishment that they're not totally self-sustainable, but much more so than, not thanks to the carpet we bought, but thanks to the work that is done in many different villages. Now, another important aspect of this work is this project that Hayat Atlas Foundation launched a few years ago, where they intended to plant a few million trees, fruit trees. They got input from villagers around the country, what fruit trees would help them be more sustainable or live more sustainably, what would help their economy, their local economy. And then they grow these saplings, and then they give them for free to the villagers. Now, to grow the saplings, so that project is great in and of itself. The recipients are pretty much Muslim, because that's a majority of Moroccans, and almost all Amazigh, Berber. Not by design, but that's usually who lives in the margins, in the periphery. Now, for the first 2-3 years, we need places to plant these saplings. And so one of the main places that was found is land owned by the Jewish community. The Jews are already not present in most of these areas. Most of the Jews are not there, definitely not in the most rural areas. But the Jewish community in those areas still owns land, usually around cemeteries, Jewish cemeteries, and tombs of holy people or righteous people. And so the Jewish community loans this land to Hayat Atlas Foundation for free, for the purpose of growing these saplings for the first few years. So here we have an example of a Jewish cemetery. Here is the Muslim Amazigh caretaker of the cemetery, 3rd generation, I think. His grandfather was the friend of the rabbi around whom this cemetery was built, and his tomb is somewhere in it. And he takes care of the cemetery, but now there are all these saplings growing there as well with the Hayat Atlas Foundation. So the saplings are going to benefit the communities. The relationships between the communities, even though in this case they're not meeting face to face, there's some kind of cooperation, and there are additional programs now taking place that are more directly with people, with Jews living in Morocco and Muslims living in Morocco, working around similar issues. And you have this worker and his family also benefiting from this, because their conditions are now better as they're employed with an actual salary and benefits for doing the same work. So everybody wins. This is just an example, one of many, of a group of Israelis and internationals in Morocco. There are tens and hundreds of thousands of Israelis who have visited Morocco in recent years. And now that we have these agreements, of course, there's between Israel and Morocco, there's more of a chance of this. So, where are we? I can't see that. One of the problems with a lot of these agreements is that between Israel and other countries, including Jordan, but also any other countries now in the region, is that Palestinians feel and usually are sidelined by these agreements. A lot of times it's even then, I don't know if it's the intention, but definitely some leaders have had that intention. But if not, whether it's an intention or an oversight or just it's not important enough to them, Palestinians are, it's like, we Israelis can make peace with other people. We don't need peace with you first, so you can sulk and we'll go ahead and progress in the meantime. So projects like this or agreements like this should actually, they're a great opportunity to keep the Israeli-Palestinian relationship, which is at the core of broader peace, at the core of these activities. So it would make well, even though Israel has bilateral relationships with a number of countries, including Morocco now, it makes much more sense. It's better for regional peace and for Israeli peace at the end of the day to include Palestinians if they want to be included. There's some problems with that, but in general, include Palestinians at the core of these processes. In general, a lot of countries in the MENA face different problems, but there are some cross-cutting things. So water was one, you might have heard about it earlier today from Gideon Bromberg on Ecopeace's work, sustainable farming, contamination of land, water, and air, et cetera, and other things. So again, just to reiterate what we said before, peace, it's not enough to have peace from above. It has to be, it's more important to be from below. Preferably it's from both the top and the bottom, and they meet somewhere in the middle. And also peace has at its core the safety, security, well-being of societies involved. And security also, thankfully, today means more than it used to be. It has a broader definition. So it also involves food security and environmental security, not just, military security like used to be the case. It used to be thought of. Anyway, so it involves all these different things, which make it, again, back at the core of peace. You can't have sustainable peace if you don't have an environment. Not only if you don't have the environment, but if you, like Israel, couldn't have, as a society, a peaceful existence, and it doesn't, because so many, among other reasons, because so many communities within it, like the Bedouin communities, don't have equal access to resources, don't have sustainable living conditions. So it's not going to be possible. Israel can ignore all it wants, the things it wants to ignore, but it doesn't make for sustainable peace. And not everybody wants to ignore it, of course, but some people do. Just like the High Atlas Foundation is one example of a place, there are many others, but I happen to know that one well, where principles of inclusiveness, representation, empowering marginalized voices and communities, capacity building, environmental preservation, etc., are key. And that's exactly the same as in peace and sustainable development. And basically, both of those, their aim is to enhance the quality of life for people. Just again, very briefly, there are some ongoing agreements now with ongoing projects or new projects. We have to make sure that they are representative and they're not just rich people from the different countries getting together to do good business with each other. And, that doesn't trickle down necessarily, even though they say it does. So it should be something that's real, not just narrow interests. And towards that end, I'll end in a second. One of the things that Farid and I are working on with other partners in Morocco, in Israel, Palestine, UAE, and hopefully more, is putting together, creating some kind of cadre. This is just an example, some kind of cadre of students and professionals from all over the MENA region, anyone who would like to, whether or not they already have official relationships with one another. So some things we can do on the surface, other things we have to do a little bit behind the scenes for now. But to equip this new cadre, a new generation of people, academics and practitioners, with both understanding the tools of peace building and a real understanding of sustainability and sustainable development. So one of the things that we're working on is this kind of a cross-boundary course, which will be partially on Zoom, of course, but it'll have a component of country visits. And it'll start with the countries that are accessible to all participants. So Israel probably won't be that first place, but hopefully, but it could be that place for whoever can visit. So in other words, it's again, along the lines of what Gideon Bromberg was talking about earlier in terms of cooperation, except that this is with more, I don't know if he mentioned more partners, but in addition to Israelis, Palestinians, Jordanians, there are additional partners throughout the region. What's important about it is that it's a platform for sharing knowledge and information, not just both for learning professional knowledge, getting actual tools, practicing what we preach, building such a community of peace and sustainability that we're learning about while we're learning about it, and a platform again to share knowledge at all levels. There's so much good work being done by academics and practitioners all around the region that really should learn from one another. And what was the last thing? Oh, and just to mention that we started doing that on a smaller scale with Bet Barrel, one college in Israel. So we have to start with where we can and with the parties that can be involved. But the idea is to make it a much broader kind of project, and that's in progress right now. So I will end now. If later anybody wants any resources, we will be happy to share them. How do we get out of this? Okay, stop share. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This was very interesting. In one of the previous panels, we had a presentation on grassroots initiatives, which relates to this in the sense that, the point of that is that, well, it's people on the ground and it's non-governmental organizations putting together projects with the aim of bringing together people from different cultures and try to break that transcultural barrier and help them understand and communicate each other better. And this is very much related to that with different focus and different methodologies, but essentially the goals are the same. So one of the questions previously was about some of the challenges in doing precisely this, the difficulties in bringing people who are culturally different to talk to each other. So one of the questions here from Mira M. Smith is precisely what have been some of the major challenges in any of the projects that you've been involved with in bringing different communities together that are culturally different. It sounds like it can be very complicated to organize and coordinate different groups of people in this way. So what would you say about that?
Adina, would you like or me to go, or you want?
I think it was directed to you initially because it was from before.
I would say, surprisingly, from a cultural point of view, that's easy. People, when they connect with each other, sometimes even you don't need translation. We have this project between Israeli, Palestinian, and Jordanian pupils where we were doing these activities, and once we forgot about the time, and we came and they were just doing things even without even knowing the language. But what's the real challenges are what I call the power structure, the imbalance. So a lot of people sometimes think that when you do a project, for example, between Israel, Palestine, Jordan, that the three partners are equal. On the paper they are, but on the ground they're not. Israel is a highly developed country with a very sophisticated rule of law and inside the country, I mean. And it's a challenge sometimes because when you're working with other communities who are impoverished, who live under occupation, the situation is different. You want to equalize all of the partners, but on the ground, the reality is different. So how you overcome this power structure or asymmetry, I call it a power asymmetry. So first of all, it's all about dialogue and treating the partner equally and equitably. So we sit together, we brainstorm, we try to maneuver and to dissect it, but also to divide it equally between all the partners. Another major issue is the funding. And I think here it's very important because sometimes it feels like a lot of the partners feel that they need only Israeli partners who cause the shot. So I think the NGO that are doing it right, or NGO who are striving to have, let's say, equal say in the funding. So if you got USAID, which is very important, like, you know, you'll be surprised to know how many grassroots projects actually are done in the area, which are not funded by the governments, funded by foreign governments with people trying to do grassroots movement. So if you try to hold all of the funds and you don't try to democratize it, it will create a lot of challenges. Another challenge that I face personally is a different, what I call climate or work condition. So for example, I worked with Jordanian partners once, and one of the issues that was raised is the pay for the people who work on the project. And I was surprised to know that while in the Israeli side, some of them were being paid, in the Jordanian side, some of them weren't being paid. And one of the conditions that I said, if I want to continue in this project, we're gonna have what's called like some kind of minimal rights, work rights to all of the participants, so that nobody feel that he's being like aggravated. So power structure, asymmetry, and what I called funding, those are the main challenges. And again, there's no magical solution, but it's all based about trying to build what I call a genuine, equitable, not only equal, equitable approach to your stakeholder.
Thank you. There was a question about examples of similar projects, but Adina has cleared that during the last part of her presentation. So there is one last question from John Parsons, and it's regarding the COVID project. And the question is, how do you make local communities trust you, trust the work that you do and the information that you provide? This is an interesting question because it's related to communicating science and research, and there is already a challenge in communicating scientific findings to the lay people. So, in the case of your project, what would you say about this?
So, I would say a gold advice: nothing replaces the human encounter. I will go to the field, to the home, to the house of that person, and I will meet him personally. No intermediary. You could have translators. For me, I could speak the 3 languages, so it's fine. I could communicate with all but nothing replaces this meeting with people. Once you meet the person, you have this dialogue. Not all of the fears will vanish, but it helped to create this trust. And it's, you know, it's, I would say, it's very hard to build and it's very easy to ruin. It's like a mirror. Once you break it, you could always see the cracks. So I'm very, very like cautious to have realistic promises, which means they say you're gonna bring peace. I said, no, I'm here to work on a COVID-19 detection project in this village. I'm not gonna end the occupation. I'm not gonna end the pollution from the stone industry. I'm working on the specific project to coordinate expectation. You can't promise big things and you should not. And that's why I believe in small candles approach. You light small candle. The government, maybe they're gonna have the big impact, but for me, be realistic, meet the people, and all the time communicate, give feedback. So after we finish our project, we will go back to the community and do what's called community engagement stakeholders. We present our data, we listen to feedback and plan together future plans.
Thank you. Adina, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
Do you have any other questions, or can I just say like tying something together?
There are no further questions, so you can go ahead.
Okay, so just to go back to some of the wonderful models I presented that were so sophisticated. the drawings. But I think, again, it's simultaneous. We're just like in peace building in general. You have, if you wanted, you act from where you can. You insert yourself into the picture wherever you have access. So the same thing goes with environmental issues. So and sustainability. So ideally, you would have policies and frameworks and structures eventually from above that are conducive to sustainable peace, which includes sustainable development and environmental peace. That's not always the case, so we don't wait for that, like Fareed said. So we act from where we are, and we build peace and we build relationships through specific projects or through specific needs of communities, make it relevant to people. It's easier to communicate when there's been no direct conflict, like between Israelis and Moroccans recently. It's not a problem. Israeli Jews and Bedouin, there's a little more tension in recent years, but it's still, it's critical and it's possible. But if you're looking systemically at peace and you're a negotiator, you're someone who has a say in negotiations and in the bigger picture, then you have to understand that all these different activities around sustainability are at the core. They're not a side issue. They're not an afterthought. Without them, there's no sustainable peace. You can reach an agreement on paper. It's absolutely meaningless if you don't have the meat that goes along with it, or if we're environmentalists, the vegetables that go along with it. So.
Well, thank you so much. We've run out of time. This was a great presentation. Thank you, Adina. Thank you, Fareed. And thank you to our attendees. We have one more hour of panels following this one. So hopefully you will join us for the end of the day. Thank you both.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, the audience.
See you in 10 minutes. Bye.
Bye-bye.